They called her the Apache Shame, but he turned her into his greatest pride. The rope hit the dirt post before the girl did. She landed hard on her knees in the center of Red Rock's main street, wrists bound behind her back, hair matted with red dust, a bruise running jaw to cheekbone like a storm moving in. 3 men on horseback circled her slow, the way vultures circle something that isn't quite dead yet. The whole town watched from the boardwalks. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. One of the riders, a thick-necked man named Colt Danner, leaned forward in his saddle and spit into the dirt beside her face. "Half-breed trash," he said, loud enough for the whole street to hear. "Apache Shame, that's what you are." The girl did not look up. Her breathing was controlled, shallow, and her jaw was set like someone who had learned long ago that showing pain then only gave men like Danner something to enjoy. Her name was Nyla. She was 19 years old. Her mother had been a schoolteacher from Kansas, and her father had been an Apache scout who died of a fever before she could walk. She had spent her whole life in the cracks between 2 worlds, belonging fully to neither. She had a scar on her left palm from a knife she had pulled out of her own leg at 14. She had never once asked anyone for help. She was not about to start now. The town of Red Rock sat at the edge of the New Mexico territory, like a bad idea someone built a saloon around. It had 300 people, 1 sheriff who drank too much, 2 preachers who agreed on nothing, and enough grudges stored between its walls to fuel a war. It also had a reputation for handling things its own way, which usually meant whoever had the most guns made the rules. Colt Danner had the most guns. He ran the cattle operation east of town, a spread called the Iron Horn, and he ran it the way a boot runs over an anthill. He had been pushing smaller ranchers off their land for 2 years, cutting water rights, burning fence lines, and when that didn't work, sending his men to deliver the kind of persuasion that left marks. The sheriff looked the other way. The mayor looked the other way. The whole town had trained itself to look the other way. So when Danner's men dragged Nala into the street and dumped her there like a sack of feed, nobody was surprised. She had been caught crossing Ironhorn land, they said. She had stolen water, they said. She had no business being anywhere near civilized people, they said. She had been walking to the next town to find work. The rider on the left dismounted and yanked her upright by the arm. That was the moment the door of the barbershop opened. The man who stepped out was not remarkable to look at. He was lean, somewhere around 30, with a week's worth of stubble and trail dust still on his coat. He had a hat pulled low and boots that had seen serious miles. He carried no visible weapon. He walked like someone who had decided something before he even opened the door. His name was Cole Harlan. He had ridden into Red Rock 2 hours ago, tied his horse at the rail, and gone inside to get a shave. He had no business in this town, no land here, no connections, no stake in anything that happened inside its limits. Then he had been passing through on his way north, where a rancher in Colorado had offered him work. He stopped at the edge of the boardwalk. He looked at the girl. He looked at Danner. He looked at the crowd on both sides of the street, every one of them staring at their boots or the sky or any place that wasn't the middle of the road. He stepped down into the street. "Cut her loose," he said. The voice was not loud. It was not angry. It was the kind of voice that had already decided how this was going to end and was simply informing the other parties. Danner turned in his saddle and looked at Cole from the way a man looks at something he expects to step over. "Who are you?" "Nobody," Cole said. "Cut her loose." The rider holding Nala's arm tightened his grip and looked at Danner for direction. But the other rider on horseback let his hand drift toward his holster. The street went very still, the kind of still that only happens when a lot of people are holding their breath at once. Nala's eyes moved to Cole for the first time. She did not look grateful. She looked calculating. She looked like a woman taking the measure of a man and deciding whether he was useful, dangerous, or just another problem in a long line of problems. He did not look back at her. His eyes were on Danner. "Last time," Cole said. Danner smiled. It was the smile of a man who had never once lost a standoff in this town and did not expect today to be different. He nodded at the rider on the ground. The rider reached for his gun. He did not get it clear of the leather before Cole crossed the distance between them, took the man's wrist, and then turned it in a way that produced a sound like green wood snapping. The rider went down. The horse shied sideways. Danner's hand went to his own gun and froze when he found Cole already looking at him from 8 feet away, the rider's pistol in hand, thumb on the hammer. Nobody shot. Nobody moved. Nala looked at her wrists. The rope was still on them. Cole reached into his pocket with his free hand, produced a small folding knife, and held it out to her without looking away from Danner. She took it, cut herself free, stood up straight. "This isn't over," Danner said. "I know," Cole said. Danner pulled his horse around, signaled to his men, and rode back down the street the way a man rides when he is already planning something worse. The fallen rider limped after them, cradling his wrist. The crowd dispersed like smoke. Cole looked down at his hands, then at the knife in Nala's. "Keep it," he said. He turned to go back to the barber shop. "You just made an enemy," Nala said behind him. Her voice was dry, direct, the voice of someone who dealt in facts and had no patience for anything else. He stopped. "I know that too," he said. He went inside. The barber, hands shaking, picked up his straight razor again. Through the window, Cole watched Nala stand alone in the center of the street for a long moment. She looked at the knife. She folded it closed. She put it in her pocket. Then she picked up her pack from the dirt, squared her shoulders, and walked. She did not look back. Neither of them knew yet what Danner would do next. Neither of them knew that the town of Red Rock was sitting on a secret that would split it open before the week was out. Neither of them knew that 2 strangers who had not exchanged names were already tangled in something that would cost them both before it was done. The sky over Red Rock turned the color of old copper as the sun dropped behind the mesa. Somewhere east of town, on the Ironhorn spread, Colt Danner was already talking to his men. Cole found her that evening behind the livery stable, building a fire the size of her fist from almost nothing. She had a tin cup, a rolled blanket, and a way of moving around a campsite that said she had done this so many times the motions were part of her bones. He stood at the corner of the building and watched her coax a flame out of dry grass and 2 sticks. She did not look up. "You planning to stand there all night?" she said. "Oh, or did you want something?" He came around the corner and crouched down across the fire from her. "I need to know what Danner wants with you," he said. She looked up then. Her eyes were dark and steady, the color of creek water in shadow. "Why?" "Because he's going to come back," Cole said, "and I would rather know what I walked into than be surprised by it." She was quiet for a moment. The fire caught, small and determined. "My mother's land," she said. 40 acres on the South Creek. She filed the deed before she died. It is the only water source on the west side of the Ironhorn. Danner needs it to grow his herd. He has been trying to take it since the day they buried her. "How long ago was that?" 8 months. She said it the same way someone says a number in a ledger. No flinch, no drop in the voice. Cole noted the absence of both. "You have the deed," he said. "I have the deed." "Where?" "Somewhere he hasn't found it yet," she said. And the way she said it told him that was as far as that conversation was going. He accepted that. He sat down fully, pulled off his hat, and set it on his knee. "My name is Cole Harlan," he said. "Nala," she said. Just that. The fire burned between them. A horse shifted in the stable behind the wall. Out on the flat, a coyote said something to the dark and got no answer. "You should leave this town," she said. "Danner doesn't forget." "Neither do I," Cole said. She studied him the way she had studied him in the street. The same calculation, the same refusal to be impressed by anything until it had earned the right. "What do you want out of this?" she said. It was the right question, and he had been asking it himself since he stepped off that boardwalk. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. She made a sound that was almost a laugh and almost wasn't. "At least you don't lie," she said. He didn't answer that. They sat in silence while the fire got comfortable. And somewhere across town, in the back room of the saloon, Colt Danner laid a map on a table and put his finger on a square of land beside the South Creek and told his men exactly what needed to happen before the week was out. 3 of those men were already riding before midnight. Cole heard them pass. He was awake, back against the stable wall, hat over his face. He counted hoofbeats. 3 horses, moving east at a pace that was not casual. He looked across the fire. Nala was already sitting up, her eyes open. She had heard them too. "East," she said. "Mere east," he confirmed. She stood, packed her blanket into her roll in 4 practiced moves, and looked at him. "The deed is buried on my mother's land," she said, "under the east fence post of the kitchen garden. If they find it, there is no case, no claim, nothing." Cole was already on his feet. They moved through the dark town without speaking. 2 shapes at the edge of the street, past the sleeping houses, past the church with its broken bell, past the last fence line of red rock, and into the open country where the stars were so thick they cast a shadow. The South Creek was 4 miles. They ran most of it. The farmhouse was dark and small and tired-looking, the way buildings get when nobody lives in them anymore. The kitchen garden was overgrown, the fence posts tilted with neglect. One in the east corner was exactly where Nala said it was. They were 50 yards out when they saw the lantern light moving near the garden. One man, crouching. Cole stopped. Nala stopped beside him. The man was digging. Cole moved wide to the left, keeping low. Nala went right without being told. The man with the lantern had his back to them, working a small spade into the dirt around the base of the east post, and he was close, too close. The post was right there, and the spade was biting down into packed earth with a sound like a clock ticking. Cole covered the last 30 yards at a run. The man heard him at 10 feet, spun, grabbed for the lantern to use as a weapon, and got it halfway up before Cole hit him like a train changing directions. They went down hard in the garden bed, through dead tomato plants, rolling. He and the lantern dropped and snuffed itself out in the dirt. Darkness. The man was strong, panicked, and desperate. He got a hand on Cole's throat. Cole got a knee on the man's chest and stayed there until the grip loosened and the fight went out of him in a long, ragged exhale. Nala was already at the post. She had a stick from the fence rail and was prying at the base of the post with a focus that had nothing to do with the struggling men 6 feet behind her. Her hands found something wrapped in oilcloth, small and firm, tucked 12 inches down in the dry earth. She pulled it free, pressed it against her chest. Cole let the man up. "Go back to Danner," he said, "and tell him it wasn't there." The man looked at Cole, looked at Nala, looked at the oilcloth packet she was already wrapping back against her body under her jacket. He ran. Nala stood in the dead garden of her mother's house and held the deed in both hands, and the sky above her was full of cold stars, and she did not say a single word. Cole did not say anything either. Some things don't need words. Some things need to be felt in the dark and the quiet before they become real. He gave her that. Then, 2 more riders, he said. He sent 3. She looked up. Then we need to move, she said. They moved. But the other 2 riders were not at the farmhouse. They were already back in Red Rock, at that very moment, delivering a message to the sheriff that Cole Harlan was a wanted man in 2 territories, and that Nala had stolen property from the Iron Horn, and that Colt Danner was requesting the full authority of the law be applied to both of them by first light. The sheriff, as who owed Danner 3 years of silence and a gambling debt, read the message twice. Then he pinned on his badge and started loading his rifle. Cole and Nala came back into town before dawn, like a secret trying to stay quiet. The streets were still dark, the saloon was dark, every window was dark. But Cole's skin was doing the thing it did when something was wrong and everything looked right. He had learned to trust that feeling in places where trusting it had kept him alive. He stopped at the mouth of the main street. Nala stopped beside him. "Something is different," she said low. "Yes," he said. The horse at the hitching rail in front of the sheriff's office was lathered. It had been ridden hard recently. The light inside the office was lit, even though it was 4 in the morning, and Sheriff Lou Pratt had never voluntarily been awake at 4 in the morning in his professional life. Cole pulled Nala back into the alley beside the dry goods store. "How much of this town is bought by Danner?" he said. She thought about it. The sheriff, 2 of the 3 deputies, the judge when he rides the circuit. Who isn't? Hattie Dale, Nala said. And for the first time, a thing moved in her voice that wasn't calculation. Something almost warm. She runs the boarding house. She was a friend to my mother. Where? End of the North Street. Yellow door. They moved through the alleys, keeping to the dark sides of buildings, stepping wide around the pools of moonlight. Cole had done this before, moved through places that wanted him gone, but never with someone at his side who moved as clean and quiet as Nala did. She matched his pace exactly, read the same shadows he read, stopped when he stopped without him signaling. He filed that away. Hattie Dale answered the door in a heavy robe with a shotgun in one hand and a candle in the other, which told Cole everything he needed to know about her character. She was 60, built like a woman who had carried heavy things her whole life, with gray hair pinned up crooked and eyes that went straight to Nala and softened. "Get inside," she said, before either of them spoke. She fed them cornbread and cold coffee and listened while Cole laid out what had happened. She did not interrupt. She did not exclaim. No, she listened the way people listen when they already know half of what they're hearing and have been waiting for someone to say the rest out loud. When Cole finished, Hattie put down her cup. "Lou Pratt has a warrant," she said. "Danner rode in himself an hour ago. They're saying Cole robbed one of the Iron Horn hands. They're saying Nala trespassed and destroyed property." "The deed," Cole said. "If she walks into that sheriff's office," Hattie said, "that deed disappears. And her with it, most likely." Cole looked at Nala. She was looking at the table. Not lost, not scared. Thinking. "The circuit judge," she said. "When does he ride in?" 3 days, Hattie said. "He is bought," Cole said. "Elias Rourke is bought," Hattie said. "But there is a territorial marshal who has been asking questions about Danner for 6 months. A man named Frank Deal. He is stationed in Santa Fe." "Santa Fe is 2 days' hard ride," Cole said. "Yes," Hattie said. The candle between them popped and settled. "Someone has to ride for the marshal," Nala said. "And someone has to stay here and keep the deed out of Danner's hands until he arrives." She said it flat, the way she said everything. but she was looking at Cole when she said it. And there was a question under the flat that she would not ask out loud. Cole looked at the deed on the table between them. He looked at Nala. He had ridden into this town with nothing but a horse and a destination. He had no stake here, no history, no reason beyond the moment he had stepped off a boardwalk and decided something without knowing why. "I'll stay," he said. She held his eyes for a second, just one. "Don't lose it," she said. She took the deed from the table. She pressed it into his hand. Her fingers were cold from the night air and calloused at the tips, the hands of someone who worked and had always worked, and the contact lasted maybe 2 seconds. He closed his hand around the oilcloth. She was already standing, already nodding to Hattie, already moving toward the back of the house where Hattie kept a spare horse in the small pen behind the woodshed. Cole watched her go. Hattie watched Cole watch her go. "She has been fighting for that land alone for 8 months," Hattie said. Nobody in this town lifted a finger. Cole said nothing. "She is not easy," Hattie said. "She does not trust easy, love easy, or forgive easy. That girl was built out of hard years and she knows it." Cole turned the oilcloth packet in his hands. I'm not looking for easy," he said. Hattie made a sound that might have been approval and refilled his coffee. Outside, the sky was beginning to lose its darkest black, the edge of the horizon going the faint gray of something about to change. Cole sat at Hattie's table and listened to the town breathe around him and thought about what it meant to stake yourself to a thing you had no claim to. At 5:30, boots hit the boardwalk outside. 2 of them, heavy. Cole looked at Hattie. She pointed at the back room without a word. Cole moved. The knock on the door came 3 seconds later. Official. The kind of knock that expects compliance. Cole pressed himself against the back wall of the spare room, deed in his coat, one hand near the borrowed pistol Hattie had pushed across the table at him 20 minutes ago, and listened. "Hattie Dale," said a voice outside. "Open up. Sheriff's business." He heard Hattie shuffle to the door, heard the creak of hinges, heard 2 pairs of boots step onto her floor. "Looking for a man named Cole Harlan," the deputy's voice said. "And a half-breed girl?" "Lot of people come through here," Hattie said, her voice flat and tired in exactly the way an old woman's voice should be at 5 in the morning. "I rent rooms. I don't track names. Mind if we look around?" A pause the length of a breath. "I mind," Hattie said. "Come back with paper." Another pause, then boots. Back toward the door. The creak of hinges again. "Tell Danner," one of the deputies said from the doorway, "that we know she was here." "You tell him yourself," Hattie said. "I don't run messages for that man." The door closed, though Cole did not move for 2 full minutes. Then he came out of the back room and looked at Hattie Dale standing in her kitchen in her robe with her shotgun and her candle, and he thought she was possibly the most composed person he had ever met. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me," she said. "Just don't get shot before that marshal arrives. I have not put up with 30 years of this town to watch it end badly." He almost smiled. "Yes, ma'am," he said. The longest part of staying is the waiting. Cole had done plenty of both in his life, but staying still while the walls closed in required a different kind of patience than riding. The kind that sat in your chest like a stone and reminded you every 10 minutes that doing nothing felt like doing wrong. He spent the first day in Hattie's back room, moving only when the coast was clear, watching the street through a gap in the curtain. Danner had the town locked down in everything but name. His riders were posted at both ends of the main road. The sheriff made rounds every 2 hours like a man performing diligence for an audience. Nobody came or went from Red Rock without being looked at. Cole turned the deed in his hands. It was real, handwritten on thick paper that had aged but not crumbled, with the territory seal pressed into the lower corner. 40 acres, a water source, Nala's mother's name in clean script at the top. It was worth more than land. It was worth the story of a woman who had built something and a daughter who had refused to let it be taken. Hattie brought him food and information in equal portions. Yet Danner was telling everyone that Cole had pistol-whipped one of his men unprovoked. He was telling everyone that Nala had been running a scheme to forge land deeds. He was telling the story the way a man tells a story when he owns the room he is telling it in, loud and certain and with no patience for questions. Some people believed him. Some people believed him because it was easier. On the second day, Cole made a mistake. He stepped outside before full dark because the walls were pressing in and he needed air. He crossed behind the livery, moved along the creek line, and was turning back toward Hattie's when he came face to face with one of Danner's riders at the edge of the tree line. The man was watering his horse, and he saw Cole at 15 feet. They both froze. And the man was faster to his gun, but Cole was faster to the decision, and the difference between the two is everything. Cole's elbow caught the man under the jaw before the pistol cleared the leather. The man went down into the creek mud, dazed, horse shying sideways and splashing. Cole took the man's gun, horse, and hat. He left him breathing and unhappy in the mud. He rode the man's horse to the edge of the north pasture, turned it loose, and walked back to Hattie's in the dark with a second pistol and the knowledge that Danner now knew exactly where he was. Hattie looked at the extra gun when he came through her back door. "You went out," she said. "Yes," he said. "Was it worth it?" He thought about it honestly. "No," he said. "Sit down," she said. "Eat something. You're no good to anyone if you do something foolish out of restlessness." He sat. He ate. The night passed slow. The morning of the third day came gray and uncertain, clouds building over the mesa the way they did before a storm, the kind of weather that made horses uneasy and men jumpy. Cole was at the window at first light. He watched Danner's riders change posts. He counted 4 visible, which meant at least 2 he couldn't see. At 8 in the morning, Danner himself rode slowly down the main street and stopped in front of Hattie's boarding house. He sat there on his horse for 1 long minute. Then he looked up at the window where Cole was standing. Cole did not step back. Danner smiled his flat, patient smile and rode on. 2 hours later, a rider came in from the south at a speed that had nothing casual about it. And Cole felt the stone in his chest shift for the first time in 2 days. He was at Hattie's back door, already stepping out, already watching the road. The rider pulled up at the far end of the street and swung down. And when the trail dust settled, Cole could see it was Nala. And beside her, stepping down from a second horse, was a broad man in a gray coat with a badge on the chest that caught the flat morning light. Frank Deal, Territorial Marshal. She had made it. Cole let out a breath he had been holding for 2 days. He straightened, tucked the deed inside his coat one final time, and walked out into the street. Danner was already there, sitting his horse in the middle of the road, watching Nala and the marshal approach from the south. He had 4 riders flanking him. His expression had not changed from the flat, impatient look he wore when he thought he had already won. Cole came from the north. Nala came from the south. They met in the middle of the road at the same time the marshal did, and Danner found himself between all 3 of them with his riders behind him and nowhere elegant to go. "Colt Danner," Frank Deal said, and his voice carried the kind of quiet authority that didn't come from a gun. It came from a badge that had weight behind it. "You are going to answer some questions about land deeds, water rights, and the harassment of a lawful property owner. You are going to do it in front of me and in front of this town. Danner looked at Cole. Cole pulled the deed from his coat and held it up. Danner looked at it, looked at the marshal, looked at Nala. His riders stayed where they were, not because they were loyal, because they were reading the room. One of them turned his horse around and walked it out of town at a casual pace that fooled nobody. Then another. Danner was still sitting his horse in the middle of the road when his men were down to 2, and he was down to that flat, patient smile and the growing realization that Red Rock had been watching all of this for a very long time and had simply been waiting for someone to make it safe to say so. The door of the dry goods store opened. Then the barber shop. Then the diner. People came out onto the boardwalks and stood there and looked at Danner the way they had been looking at their boots for 2 years. Except now they were looking at him. He dismounted. He let the marshal take him by the arm. He walked. The territorial court convened in Hattie's dining room because it was the largest room in town that Danner didn't own. Marshal Frank Deal sat at the head of the table. The sheriff surrendered his badge without being asked, which saved everyone the trouble of asking. 2 of the townspeople who had witnessed Danner's operations over the years found their voices and used them, which they had not been able to do before, but found was less difficult than they had imagined once someone else went first. It took 4 hours. At the end of it, the deed to 40 acres on the South Creek was confirmed in Nala's name, witnessed by the marshal and recorded in the territory's official ledger. Danner was remanded to Santa Fe to face charges that had been building there for months. His Ironhorn riders dispersed like smoke in a wind. The town of Red Rock sat very still when it was done, the way a room sits still after a sound that has been going on for a long time finally stops. Cole was leaning against the fence rail outside Hattie's when Nala came out. She stood beside him. They looked at the street. I don't know what I'm going to do with 40 acres, she said. You could start with the kitchen garden, he said. The fence posts need work. She was quiet for a moment. That was a terrible joke, she said. Yes, he agreed. She turned and looked at him. The same calculation as always, the same measuring look, except something in it was slightly different from the look in the street 3 days ago. Like a door that had been closed and was now not fully closed. Where were you headed? She said. Before Red Rock. Colorado, he said. Ranching work. Is it still waiting for you? Oh, still? He thought about it, honestly, the same way he had when she asked him what he wanted. I don't know, he said. The sky over Red Rock had gone gold and wide and clean in the way it goes after a storm has threatened all day and then decided against itself. The mesa caught the light and held it. A hawk moved in a long, slow circle above the South Creek, 4 miles east, above 40 acres of land and a kitchen garden with fence posts that needed work. Nala was still looking at him. I am not easy, she said. It was not a warning, and it was not an apology. It was a fact, offered plainly, the way she offered everything. I know, Cole said. I do not trust quickly. I know that too. She looked at the hawk. The farmhouse needs a new roof, she said. The water line needs clearing. There is about 3 months of work before it is livable. He said nothing. I cannot pay wages, she said. He said nothing. She looked back at him. I can pay in board and meals, she said. And the south pasture has room for a horse. Cole looked at the hawk, at the golden sky, at the town of Red Rock, which was already beginning to make the small, ordinary sounds of a place returning to itself after a long silence. He pushed off the fence rail. My horse needs water, he said. and I should tell the livery I'm staying." He walked toward the stable. Nala watched him go. Hattie appeared in the doorway behind her, because Hattie appeared everywhere that mattered at the exact right moment, and then stood there with her arms crossed and the look of a woman who had seen a great many things resolve themselves slowly in the fullness of time. "Well," Hattie said. Nala said nothing. "He stayed," Hattie said, "when there was no reason to stay." Nala folded her arms and watched Cole walk down the street and stop to talk to the livery boy and gesture south toward the road out of town. They had called her the Apache Shame. They had said it in the street, in the saloon, in the slow, cruel way that towns talk about people who don't fit neatly into what they've decided to be. But there was a man walking down a dusty street right now who had stepped off a boardwalk and decided something. And he was still here, and the deed was in her name. And the South Creek ran clear and cold across land her mother had loved. She unfolded her arms. She squared her shoulders. She walked after him.